Hello, I'm Gavin Horgan, Headmaster of Millfield School in Somerset, the largest co-educational boarding school in the UK. Welcome to the Millfield Way Podcast. Here, you'll hear from teachers, coaches and students from Millfield and Millfield Prep School. Millfield is traditionally different, and this is the Millfield Way.
Welcome back to another episode of the Millfield Way Podcast, in conversation with the Head of Millfield Prep, Dan Thornburn. My name is Matt Davidson and I'm delighted to be joined by Dan today. So Dan, how are you and where are you joining us from?
Hi there, Matt. I'm well, thank you. I'm actually sitting looking at a beautiful view out of my office on the first day of term, and it's been a lovely first day back, seeing all the children again. It's been brilliant.
It's good to hear. So the first few questions, we're going to go through kind of a bit more about you before we get into the education side of it. So whereabouts are you from and where did you grow up?
Well, first of all, how long have we got on that question? How long is this podcast? Because my sort of upbringing has been an interesting one. I've lived all over the place. I was born in Germany. My dad was in the army, so I was born in Germany, then lived in Ireland and America, back to Germany for a bit before I moved to England, and then we've sort of dotted around the UK a fair bit. So I'm not really from anywhere. I tell people I'm a nomad. That's me.
Well, that ties in well for my next question. If you've been kind of all over the country, so south or north, what do you think's better?
No, I'm definitely I'm a southerner all the way. I think if I go north of Watford, I get a nosebleed. That's it. It's anything in the south is good. I'm a southern softie.
Ah, good to hear. So more about you. So what are your personal interests or hobbies? So what do you do away from kind of the job?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one. I think a few years ago, pre-children, I had a huge number of different hobbies, and I still like to think I do lots of them, but probably I haven't for a few years. I love my sport. Any sport will do. Rugby, cricket, hockey, squash. But to be frank, I haven't played much of that for a number of years now. But I play the piano by ear, so I like a bit of that, and dog walks with the family. Basically, anything that gets me outside is a good thing.
So it's handy when the weather's like this. And
when the weather's sunny, it's gorgeous, and that's very handy.
So can you tell us a bit about your background and your career and any previous roles you had before Millfield Prep?
Yeah, I've done a fair bit in my career, and I did a fair bit. I say this to parents usually on open days before I became a teacher. So I've done quite a few jobs. I won't list them all because they're usually for quizzes, and most of the children don't guess them. But before teaching, I was a removal man. I've been a milkman, a TV delivery guy. I've been a sort of painter decorator. So I've done an awful lot before teaching. But then my teaching career, I was a gap student actually at a school in Hemel Hempstead called Lockers Park, and then I moved to a school in Salisbury, and sort of in both of those schools I developed my career, and I became deputy head at the school in Salisbury called Chaffing Grove, and then I've done 2 headships before this. So I was head of a small school in Cornwall called St Petroc on the north coast, again southerner. But north coast of Cornwall, so the Cornish would call me a northerner. And then after that, I was a head of a school called Edgeborough, which is on the outskirts of Farnham in Surrey.
So you've lived kind of all over the world, and you've also had a lot of careers, haven't you?
I've done a few jobs and a few different things in my time. Yeah.
So what inspired you to kind of embark on a career in education? Because like you said, you tried other roles. What was it about education, you think?
It depends how you want to... I get told off for saying I fell into teaching because that seems to be the thing everyone says. But it was quite an unorthodox route. And I'm very open with the pupils about this. I seemingly failed my A-levels in that I didn't get the grades that I wanted to go to the university I wanted to. So I was on a bit of an enforced gap here. But I always tell the story, it wasn't a failure at all. It actually opened a huge number of doors. So, ironically, a friend from school was a gap student, and he was going to do 2 years and decided just to do 1. And his dad said, "Look, there's a great school that needs a gap student. Why don't you do it? You've got nothing else to do in that year." And that's how I started. I sort of got into the prep school world, and it was really enjoyable. I had such a brilliant year, and that inspired me when I went to university to think about teaching afterwards. And as it turned out, I did my degree. And then the school, there weren't too disappointed in me and wanted me to come back. So I went there to become a teacher and got qualified on the job. So it's quite a roundabout route, but it all boils down to the fact that it was such a brilliant place to be in a prep school, doing lots of different jobs as a gap student. Was a great starting point into the career.
So now you've become the head of Millfield Prep back in January. How did you finish your first term? I know all sorts has happened, but how would you kind of describe how it's been so far?
Yeah, it's been brilliant. Brilliant is a word that's associated a lot with Millfield, which is great. It's been a really brilliant time. It has been, I can probably say the word manic. It's been really busy. And I think that's just for me personally. That's, moving schools mid-year, moving house over Christmas, starting in a new school where I don't know anyone, pupils or staff. That's always going to give you a sense of sort of almost overwhelming busyness. But it has been such a pleasure. It's been brilliant fun. I've been made to feel incredibly welcome by pupils and staff and parents of the school. So it's been a great start. I'm just really looking forward to this term and slightly longer days and slightly better weather. The first 2 weeks here, it rained non-stop, so I'm looking forward to some brighter days.
Definitely. So hopefully the rain in the first 2 weeks doesn't ruin this next question. But what was your first impression when you arrived in January?
It was a really positive impression. It didn't ruin it at all. It was actually it wasn't as bad as I make out the weather. We had as a family, it was a big move because my two children are in the school, so it was quite for us. It was just really important that they settled first, as much as me actually. In fact, more than me. And so that first impression I got of the school was a really warm, caring environment for them as pupils. So that was my experience as a parent. And then a word I use a lot about Millfield, just opportunity galore. I mean, it really is a place of limitless opportunity for children and for the staff here. And that really hit me, just the reality of what that means, that the number of things that are available to the children and the amazing breadth of what we offer. Although it was wet, it was a great first impression.
So you almost answered this in the question just then. But is there anything else you can expand on, kind of what Millfield offers that you've not seen at other schools? I
think all prep schools try to give this broad offering, this breadth. Very few will say that they are a purely academic school or a purely this or that school. But I think what I've seen here, and I won't use the girl's name, but there's an example of a girl in Year 8 who honestly has been able to get involved in so many areas. And that was just in my first term of seeing her. So from being a sort of national elite level swimmer, on a high level programme, to at the same time competing nationally in other sports, netball and hockey, national finals. She was a role in our musical. She was looking at doing, she did music scholarship and I think an academic scholarship as well. I don't know of any other school that can balance that load, and it's not just giving them the opportunity to do the stuff, it's being able to make sure they can access it without being overloaded. And we manage that through the boarding team, the pastoral team, trying to make sure that children get that balance whilst also doing an awful lot. So I don't think I've ever come across a school that can provide so much under one roof, as it were.
Is there anything that's particularly made you proud of being head in your first term? I know we've had some events already, such as the EAL dinner. I remember you spoke out in Moana.
Actually, the one that you've raised two there that were wonderful. The EAL, the sort of English as an additional language dinner, was something I've never experienced before in a school. And we're a really diverse school. I should know exactly how many different nationalities. I'm going to say 20-something in the prep. But it was a fantastic example of how integrated those pupils become very quickly in the school, and how proud they are, not just of where they've come from, but being part of Millfield itself. So that was a lovely evening with a great quiz, which the staff team won. I hasten to add, I was delighted about that. I was probably a bit over competitive on the last answer, but that was great fun. And then we had Moana, which was our senior musical, which was absolutely superb. Hugely impressive, both in terms of what the children were able to produce, but also how it was produced. It was on the sort of main school. I think it's called the Mayor Theatre, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm still learning all these things in my first term, but that, it was lovely for our children and also for the school itself and parents to be able to go and watch what was essentially a really high quality musical in a great venue, a proper theatre, which was wonderful. It was really good. So
I know you've only had one term, but have you already seen kind of the link between the senior school and the prep school at Millfield?
Yes.
And how?
I think the school is quite good at reminding people that we are one school. But there's definitely the view I've seen, the impression I've got is that it's seamless. There isn't a sort of senior and a junior. We are, of course, they are separate on their separate sites, but it's a progression. It's not really even a transition. The children progress from the prep to the senior very naturally, and we had the captains of school came down at the end of last term from the senior school to speak to some of our more senior pupils, and I think it's a really great relationship. It's big brother, big sister sort of relationship stuff that is wonderful. It's a nice rounded sort of all through school.
So just touching on the senior school then, we did a bit of research and found out that you were head boy under the former Millfield headmaster Peter Johnson. Did you ever speak about Millfield when you at that stage?
Yeah, that's good research. Well done. I try not to talk about that too much. People always take the mick that I was head boy and now I'm a headmaster. Peter was my head at Wrekin, and then he moved to Millfield, and we kept in touch, and we still do. And it's a great story that we've managed to, sort of the circle's been completed, and I'm now at the school that he was in charge of. But we spoke about Millfield quite a lot when he moved, and I visited here. I was at Exeter Uni, and I played a bit of rugby and played a bit of cricket, and it just shows the standard of the sport here, that our university first and second team cricket came over to play Millfield first and seconds as a sort of pre-season game. And I came over when I was at university to play in one of those games, and Peter was here, so he gave me a quick tour and showed me around. So it's been really nice to keep that link. It's been great.
Did you have any idea at all back then that you thought one day?
No, not at all. I was still probably at that stage. I was still dreaming of being a rugby player. But no, interestingly, I was at Millfield more recently than that, working at a school in Salisbury, as I mentioned, Chaffin. And I was here probably, I was at Chaffin for 9 years, so I came to Millfield probably 3, 4, 5 times every year for sport. It was probably more than that, actually, 3 or 4 times a term, bringing fixtures and teams over. And even then, I had absolutely no concept that I would ever be running the place. And so I do pinch myself sometimes that I'm actually sitting in the chair and in charge. It's great.
So as well as being in charge, you're also a parent at Millfield Prep.
Yeah.
So your son Walter and daughter Molly. How have you found the first term as a parent at Millfield?
It's been really positive. I think, if I'm honest, I try really hard to not be a parent in the same way as my wife is. It sounds a bit confusing, but I'll try to give some context. It's not easy for a head of a school to have their children in the school with them. It's not easy sometimes for the children, and it's sometimes not easy for the staff either to know that their boss is also going to be sitting down opposite them for a parent-teacher consultation. So I try to be removed as much as I can, and my wife Emmy does the main school parenting correspondence stuff. But I've really enjoyed when I have been a dad around school, at fixtures and things like that. I try to say to parents that if I'm watching a match and my child's playing in it, then I'm a dad at the moment. I'm not the head, so please don't come and moan to me about lost property or whatever it might be.
Have Walter and Molly spoke to you about how they found it and how they've settled in?
Yeah, they have a lot, and that's been great for us. I think I mentioned earlier on, getting them settled was a big part of us as a family settling. And they've loved it. It's tough for children to move schools. I think that there's no doubt that anyone who is looking at relocating is going to go through the same thing of uprooting a family, children having to leave their well-set friendship groups in their previous schools. But both of them have settled quickly and have been made to feel welcome and have found good friends, and that's great. When I speak to them about what did you do at school today, there's a lot of examples of great stuff that's happened with friendships, and as well as the brilliant fun things they've been doing. There's a lot of positive social stuff too, which is really pleasing.
So from your experience, like you said, it's obviously it's a really big decision to make. What would you say to a prospective parent that's looking to send their child to Millfield, and maybe why you think it's the right decision?
I think it comes back to that word I said earlier, opportunity. I would honestly struggle to find another prep school with the links to a senior school that provides such opportunity for children in all areas. Clearly we know there's a reputation for the strength of Millfield sport, and it's true. But there's so much more that goes on here, and as a prep head, you asked me, what I was proud of. I'm hugely proud of seeing the small wins that don't make the headlines. The children that are either struggling with either dyslexia or that are growing in confidence in the classroom. This is a school that really has, I think, no equal in terms of its capacity and its resource. We're a sort of school that if a child wants to try something, whatever that may be, we will find a way of making that happen. And that's something that I've experienced both, as I say, as a dad and as a head now.
So in a recent podcast we did with Hayley, the head of equestrian at Millfield Prep, that was something that surprised me. There's an equestrian centre and people can try out for the first time. She also told me that apparently you want to learn how to ride. And
well, there we go.
You'll be going down.
I'm looking forward. That could be the next marketing campaign. Is me. That'll get millions of hits. Me trying to ride. I told you I lived in Northern Ireland. I think I did for a bit. And I used to enjoy there was an army barracks and there was a stables attached, and I really enjoyed going down to see the horses and helping to muck out. But I was never really an accomplished rider. So. I did say to her cheekily that I would love to come down and have a go, but I think I need to have some private practice first before I put a camera out.
For the cameras out, I was going to say I'll have to make sure I don't miss that one. So back to education, and kind of from a teaching perspective, is there a certain philosophy you have with education or certain values that you want to instill in the pupils?
Very much so, and that my own personal values align very closely with Millfield, which is part of the reason I'm here. But anyone that's been in a school that I've run, or any pupil, and most of the parents and staff too, will have heard me banging on over and over again about two or three things. I talk an awful lot about giving your best. I think it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true. Children giving their best is what we really want. It's not about level of performance, it's about level of effort first, and at prep school age I think that's vital, and that's across all areas. That's in the classroom, that's in music, art, drama, that's in sport, but it's also in relationships and social side. Giving your best. I talk an awful lot about kindness, and I was delighted that be kind is one of our core values here, and I think without that any school is a tough place to be. And I'm delighted that Millfield is such a kind place, kind environment. And then the other one I talk about a lot is about trying to be positive. For children anyway, trying to approach school in a really positive way. I'm never going to pretend that school is perfect. Every one of us who's been to school knows that there are going to be ups and downs, and that there will be times that are harder than others. But trying to encourage children to approach school positively. And we all sit there when you've left school going, well, I wish I could be back and do it again, and that's the wisdom of age and experience. But trying to tell children that even though some of this might be hard, approaching things positively will really help them get through, and it will prepare them properly for what comes next, both at senior and in the world beyond.
It's interesting that you said the value of be kind that Millfield has. When you arrived at the school, did you think, well, I'm almost quite glad that's there because it's something that I believe so strongly?
Very much, and I think had it not been so visibly front and centre, our values are really clear, and I'll be very open. When I was looking, when the advert was out, and I was very happy at Edgeborough, and it was a great school going well. I wasn't out searching for jobs, but when Millfield, when that advert came out, and I looked hard at the values, and they were fundamental to me coming, because I think they've been very clearly thought through, and they sum up what we are about as a school, and I think that means that it's authentic. What we're offering here is what we truly believe in, and that means that you can deliver on that. It absolutely crucial to me being here.
So on to boarding now. So we currently have 137 pupils. What are the positives of a boarding education? And what is particularly special about boarding at Millfield Prep that you've seen?
Well, it's interesting to compare. I was a boarder. I told you I moved around lots, and so in the end, I think after 7 schools by the time I was 8, my parents said it's probably time to go to boarding school. That's also probably because I was the right pain and they wanted to ship me off. But I've been a boarder from 8, so I've seen what boarding, and I've felt what boarding looks like. And I know times have moved on massively, and for the better, actually. I was lucky. I had a great boarding experience at both my prep and senior schools. But I look at what Millfield offers, Millfield Prep particularly on the boarding front, and it is a mixture of an overused phrase, I suppose, but family feel. It genuinely feels like the children here are being looked after as part of a bigger family. What it does is it gives you an element of being able to develop your friendships, I think, more widely. We talk a lot as teachers, and I know we're not unique here at Millfield, but when you're a teacher in the classroom and you go and coach a child for sport, you see a different child than the one you were teaching 10 minutes before in the classroom. They're different on the sports field, and they're different again when they're here for the whole time in the boarding house or one of the boarding houses. And I think for me it's that time to develop the character that you get in a boarding school that you probably don't get quite so much if it's just a drop and go and a day school that then collects at the end of the day. You get an opportunity for children to really grow into themselves in an environment they feel comfortable in. It's a real privilege. We're helping children and their characters grow as they get older, and that's amazing. And I think, linking back to that opportunities theme I mentioned, it's even more of an opportunity when you're boarder, because you can access the stuff, to almost 24/7. I don't think Millfield ever sleeps, to be honest. So you've obviously seen the boarding houses. What did you make of it when you first saw them and first got shown around? Really impressive in terms of scale and facility. So 5 boarding houses we've got, and they're all different, and I like that. They're all unique in their own way. So 1 or 2 of the houses dotted slightly further afield, which gives the boys in those ones, as it is, a bit of a sense of being off-site, even though they're not. And then some really nice modern boarding houses too. So there's a real diversity to what we offer on the boarding front, and I think that's great. I tried really hard in my first term to get out of my office as much as possible, and I got into every boarding house, although not probably for long enough. But it was amazing to experience how different each house was, and how much everyone in their house felt that theirs was the best. It's a classic. It's like supporting a football team, but there was no doubt that when you were in one house, they were the best, and you go 100 metres down the road and you're in another one that looks pretty similar, but no, they're the best, and they all feel different and unique, and that's wonderful.
So you've got 5 boarding houses that are all the best in their own.
Absolutely, and you'll never win on that debate, I'm afraid.
So we're going to talk about sport as well. You said earlier that you played for Exeter Chiefs rugby. Is it the B team?
I played Exeter Chiefs twos, but it sounds a lot better than it does. Essentially, I played for their second team just as they became the Chiefs.
Okay.
So they weren't how many times they've won the Premiership now, I don't know. They weren't anything like that. They were still at the county ground with a speedway track around it. I had a great time. I loved rugby, and I said earlier I really wanted to be a rugby player, and realistically that probably wasn't ever going to happen, and I should have realised that a bit sooner. But yeah, I was at Exeter Uni, and they had good links with the Chiefs, and at the time that was just as they were starting to go on their journey to try to get out of that first division and into the Premiership. And yeah, if I was a second team Chiefs player 5 years later, then I'd have been really chuffed with myself. But it was, yeah, it sounds better than it sounds better now than it was then.
But what's been your impression of the sport provision at Millfield during your first terms? Have you been to see fixtures?
I've been lucky. I've seen a lot. I actually I was chatting to one of our staff, to Helen, who runs our swimming, and we qualify lots of children for all sorts of national level competitions, and I apologised to her and said, look, I'm really sorry, I'm not going to make the national swimming championships, and I tried to explain why, because if I go to one, and I would love to, I'd love to go to them all, but I can't go to them all. We get children through to national competitions in so much. I would never ever be in school if I went to all of these amazing competitions. But you know, the sport here is great. There's no denying it. I talked earlier about trying to make sure we're known for other things as well, because we're great at other things. But the sport is brilliant, and it's the breadth of sports too. You know, we're great with the team sports, but there's so much other stuff going on individually. You talk about equestrian. I mentioned swimming. You know, we've got biathlons and triathlons and all sorts of other things going. Golf and tennis. There's just anything you look at from a sports perspective is done to a very high level, but equally, and this is what I like, we cater for those who aren't going to be, you know, a national champion or an Olympic medalist, that like playing sports. You know, that is great. That's my philosophy too. You know, I want children to love running around and being outside and you know, chasing a ball. Whether or not you're winning medals for it makes no difference. If you're enjoying yourself and having fun, that's the way forward.
Very true. And like you mentioned, we are a school and education comes first. How does Millfield Prep go about supporting students who are looking to excel in sports, but making sure they have that balance that you said earlier as well?
Yeah, I think that starts to happen more as we get to the top of the prep school, sort of years 6, 7 and 8, and then it extends massively as they move into the senior school. But we're quite good at putting in bespoke programmes. So I talked earlier about a year 8 girl who was doing quite a lot, and we're having to balance those loads. Yep. But I mentioned that part of her load was her academic study. You know, she was going through an academic scholarship. So I think that individualised sort of program that we can create, because we've done it lots, it gives us we've got that great experience of doing it. We know what works and what doesn't. So I think the key is experienced staff who've seen children go through. You know, we talk about the swimming and James Guy, to know that what he went through at prep school has essentially delivered on the biggest stage at a gold medal or 2, I can't remember how many it was, but
2, yeah,
that shows that what we've got here works, and he was able to do that whilst also completing all of his studies, which is exactly as you say, the most important thing.
So we said earlier as well about the EAL dinner and Moana. Are there any events coming up that you're particularly looking forward to? Yeah,
I think well, there's quite a lot to cram into this next 9 weeks. So we're day 1 of term, and already you can see we're back up at full speed. Yep. We've got an amazing concert I've heard about that goes on. That's sort of I forget the exact term.
Rock and
pop. There we go. That happens outside down at the pavilion towards the end of term. That's going to be great. I've heard brilliant things about that. Equally, it's going to be lovely just to have these longer evenings to see the sport, the cricket, boys and girls, playing at a really high level. I'm looking forward to that, and being outside and getting my dogs humpering past it, walking around the boundaries, and hopefully not stealing the cricket balls as they go.
So the next question we have, this is putting you a bit under pressure here, because you've just had your first term, but what are your future plans for the school, kind of immediate and longer term? And where do you want to take Millfield Prep as the head?
I think you'll probably guess, we touched on it a little bit. I'd love to be able to keep what's so good about this place, which is that variety and that breadth and those opportunities, and keep the level of performance that we're delivering, but somehow magically try to find a way of us not being quite so busy. I make no bones about that, and I've said that to parents and to staff. I'm not talking about taking stuff away, but I want us to be better. Instead of adding exciting, shiny new things, new events in to the calendar, I want us to be more strategic about what we put in and why. And if we're adding something, then we've got to make sure we're not breaking ourselves and maybe taking something else out first before putting it in. So that actually it's quite a strategic point. We need to look at how we manage the workload of the children and of our staff. And I think coming through COVID, or coming out the other side of it, hopefully, most schools are looking at that and saying we probably need to just find that balance. So that's one area. I'm really looking forward to getting out and about and talking more about Millfield, because that's something that COVID has impacted too. And the idea of making sure people know globally what we're about. And we're lucky, we're a really far-reaching school with children from all over the world. But I'm looking forward to just continuing that. As a prep school, we're in a great place to be able to do that.
So the final question, this is something we end on with everyone. So if you could sum up Millfield Prep in 3 main takeaways, what would they be?
Yeah, okay, so the first you'll know, I've said it a few times, opportunity. But your first takeaway is limitless opportunity here. It is absolutely superb on that front. And then probably second, that kindness thing. It's such a kind school. It's been lovely to see that, and that's something you feel when you get here. And alongside that, the third one, probably warmth. That warmth of community. It's a lovely, warm, friendly school. And actually, and I've said this quite openly too, Millfield doesn't always have that impression from outside. That perception can sometimes be that it's a big, powerful place. And we are reasonably big, and we perform really well at lots of things that people will say that Millfield's an amazing, powerful brand, but actually it's a lovely, warm, friendly place to be. And when you get here, you see that, and that's something I'm delighted about, and it's something I will build on and develop in my time.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us, Dan.
Absolute pleasure.
So we've kind of heard all sorts about where you grew up, and we're looking forward to seeing you get out on the horses very soon.
I can't wait. In fact, I can wait. I'm gonna maybe this time next year we can do another podcast and see if I've actually got on the horses.
Good stuff.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much.